Hey y'all, have you ever wondered where we get the English word church from? Or when you consider how we use it in sentences today, where the modern concept or the modern idea of church came from, especially when you look at the New Testament? Well, in case you have, or even if you haven't, in this short video, we're going to take a quick look at the origins of the word church. When you look at the New Testament, there are a few words that are used to describe church. The first Greek word is ekklesia. And ecclesia is translated as called out ones. And we could also use the single word congregation. The next word that the New Testament uses to describe church is the Greek word koinonia. And koinonia is translated as the word fellowship. Or we could use the word communion. Now, I think it's important that before we move forward, we look at these two words and first look at how they differ. Ecclesia is used 114 times in the New Testament. And ecclesia is used to describe God's people. They're the called out ones. They are the people that God has set aside for His purposes. They are God's chosen people. In essence, they're God's congregation. Koinonia, on the other hand, describes what the people are doing. They are in fellowship. They are fellowshipping. They are in community together. They are communing or in communion together. Like I said, another term would be community. So in reality, what ecclesia is describing is the people of God, who they are, whereas koinonia is describing what those people are doing. The next term that the New Testament uses to describe church is the Greek word kuriakon. And kuriakon is derived from the Greek word kurios. And when translated, kurios simply means Lord or Master. Now, it's important to note that both kurios and kuriakon are both generic terms. They could be used to refer to God or Jesus, but they don't have to be. They could be used to refer to the Lord of this house, the Lord of this property, the Lord of these objects. Of course, in the New Testament, they had slaves, so they could be used to refer to the master's slaves or the people of the master. Once again, these words could be used to refer to God or Jesus, but they don't have to be. They are very generic. Kurios, meaning Lord or Master. Kuriakon simply means belonging to the Lord. And once again, kuriakon in a generic sense could be referring to the house that belongs to the Lord, the property that belongs to the Lord, or the people belonging to their master. That's in an earthly sense. If we were to use it in a heavenly sense or referring to God or Jesus, we could say that the temple belongs to the Lord, or the sacrifices that are belonging to the Lord, or the land belonging to the Lord. Again, it really depends on context. Interestingly enough, kuriakon is where we get the word church. So kuriakon is used oftentimes in a generic sense, and it could be used to refer to something belonging to the heavenly God or heavenly Lord, the Lord Jesus. But there is an exception to when kuriakon is used. Kuriakon is never used in the New Testament to describe the people of God. Ecclesia is used for that purpose. Ecclesia is used always to refer to God's chosen people. Kuriakon is never used for that purpose. So when you look at these two words and you think to yourself, you may be asking the question, if ecclesia is referring to God's people and kuriakon never refers to God's people, then how come our English translations are using the word church to refer to God's people? There's an interesting story about that. So William Tyndale, when he was translating what was then the modern English translation of the Bible from the original Greek and the original Hebrew, he always used the word congregation when translating the word ecclesia. He never used the word church. William Tyndale was adamant about using the term congregation because he knew the difference between the two Greek words. He knew what the ecclesia was referring to. It was referring to God's chosen people. So therefore, he translated ecclesia every single time into the word congregation. However, when King James came along, King James and his translators opted to use the word church. Why is that? Well, as you may know, King James absolutely hated the Puritans. He felt that the Puritans in their Geneva Bible directly challenged his authority, his divine authority over the Church of England. And he hated them for that. Well, as it turns out, the word congregation is very closely associated to the Puritans. And so therefore, when they translated the Bible into the King James Version, because of the term congregation's association with the Puritans, they opted to use the word church instead. So over time, kuriakon took on the general meaning of God's house. Now, one other tidbit for you. In the year 190, a gentleman by the name of Clement of Alexandria came along. Clement of Alexandria was the first person to coin the phrase, go to church. We see this phrase in some of his letters, but Clement wasn't referring to a building as we often do today. We often say, oh, I go to that church, or I go to First whatever church, or Second whatever church, or Community whatever church. I go to the church downtown. He was never referring to a building when he said, or when he wrote, go to church. Clement also wasn't referring to an event. Some of us today would say, I go to church at 10 o'clock, or I go to church Sunday nights at 6 p.m., or others would say, I go to church at 6 p.m. on Wednesday nights. Clement was not referring to the building or an event when he coined the phrase, or when he wrote the phrase, go to church. Instead, Clement was actually referring to the fellowship. I am going to the fellowship. It would be very similar to us today saying, I'm going to a Bible study, or I'm going to a community group. Of course, in 190, there was no Bible. The Bible wouldn't come along for another 160, 170 years, around 350 to 360. So instead, Clement was simply saying, I'm going to a fellowship. I'm going to what was then, for lack of a Bible, I'm going to a community group. When we look at the New Testament, keep in mind that the New Testament always refers to the people of God when it talks about the church. When it has the word ecclesia, it's always referring to God's chosen people. I want to challenge you with something. As you're driving along, maybe throughout the week or on a Sunday morning, and you see a church building, the next time you say to yourself, wow, that's a beautiful church. Look at their stained glass windows. That's an amazing portico. I want to remind you that that's not the church that the New Testament was talking about. Maybe you say to yourself, man, that church building is huge. I wonder what their electric bill is each month. Again, it's not the church. It's not the church that the New Testament was referring to. The New Testament never used the word ecclesia to refer to a building. Instead, ecclesia always referred to the people. The church is the people. It's not a building. It's not an event. It's not something you go to. The church is who you are. Thanks so much for watching.